The first thing the human learned about alien society was that silence could be louder than explosions. The plaza had been roaring only moments before, layered voices clicking, humming, vibrating through the air like a living engine. Creatures of every shape filled the open space, their bodies draped in metals, fabrics, bioluminescent markings that pulsed with status and lineage. Then the elder stepped forward, lifted one long, jointed limb, and the noise died instantly. The human swallowed. He stood barely to her shoulder, smaller than nearly everyone present, wrapped in a borrowed thermal cloak that did nothing to hide how fragile he looked among them. His boots trembled against the polished stone as if the ground itself disapproved of his existence. The matriarch's voice carried without amplification. It didn't need it. Authority did the work. This human, she announced, has been claimed. For his own safety. The word claimed rippled through the crowd. The human blinked. Claimed sounded bad. Dangerous. Like livestock or salvage. He opened his mouth to ask what that meant, then thought better of it. When a creature that old and powerful said something that confidently, interrupting felt unhealthy. Whispers erupted immediately, sharp hisses, amused clicks, scandalized gasps. Several heads turned toward the matriarch's daughters standing behind her. They were tall, confident, beautiful in a way that made the human's brain short-circuit and reboot with a warning label. Their eyes widened in perfect synchronization. She claimed him? One of them muttered. Publicly? Another added. For safety? The third repeated, voice dripping disbelief. The human shifted his weight, painfully aware that all those gazes had now locked onto him. He offered a small, awkward wave. No one waved back. The matriarch rested a protective limb just behind him, not touching, but close enough that everyone understood the message. Ownership. Guardianship. Finality. The human felt an unexpected wave of relief. Safety sounded good. Protection sounded better. After crash landing on a planet where gravity felt slightly wrong and everyone else looked like they could tear doors off starships for fun, being claimed, whatever that meant, seemed preferable to being ignored. Behind them, the daughters stared. Their mother did not claim things. She presided. She judged. She corrected planetary mistakes with a raised eyebrow and a well-placed decree. She did not claim small, soft, off-world creatures that blushed when stared at too long. Unless something scandalous was happening. As the plaza slowly resumed its noise, the daughters closed ranks around their mother, eyes flicking between her and the human. He felt suddenly like a piece of gossip wearing shoes. They followed in silence back to the family residence, the air thick with suspicion. The human's steps grew shorter, his mind racing. Was he in trouble? Was this a cultural misunderstanding? Was. For your own safety. Something predators said right before the opposite happened? Inside, the doors sealed with a low hum, cutting off the public gaze. The first daughter broke the silence. You claimed him, she said flatly. Yes, the matriarch replied. In front of everyone. Yes. For his safety. The second daughter added slowly, each word pressed like a blade. Yes. The human glanced between them, feeling like a small animal in the middle of a very polite interrogation. He raised a hand. I can go if. Stay, the matriarch said without looking at him. He stayed. The daughter's eyes narrowed. Mother, the third daughter said, folding her arms, you have governed colonies. You have dissolved wars. You have corrected genetic bloodlines with a sentence. And yet today, you claimed a human male. The room seemed to lean in. Explain, the first daughter said. The matriarch finally turned, her gaze sharp enough to quiet storms. There is nothing to explain. Oh, there is, the second daughter replied. Because claiming implies intent. And possession, the third added. And priority, the first said, eyes flicking briefly to the human's face before snapping back to their mother. The human's ears burned. Priority? Possession? His heart picked up speed, and not in a fun way. He hugged his cloak tighter, suddenly aware of how thin his bones were compared to theirs. The matriarch sighed. Not tired, annoyed? You are assuming nonsense. Then clarify. The second daughter pressed. Because from where we stand, it looks like you claimed him first. The implication hung heavy. The human's brain did something strange. It attempted to panic, failed halfway, and settled for confusion. First implied there was a line. He did not like the idea of a line. I think, he said carefully, there may be a misunderstanding. On my planet, claiming usually involves paperwork. Or sports teams. No one laughed. The daughters ignored him completely. Mother, the third daughter said softly, dangerously. You taught us never to conceal intent. I am not concealing anything, the matriarch replied. Then why him? The first daughter demanded. Why a human? Why now? The matriarch glanced down at the human at last. He tried to smile reassuringly. It came out weak. Because, she said, he would not survive otherwise. Silence fell again, heavier this time. The daughters stared at the human with new interest. He shrank slightly under it. Survive what? The second daughter asked. Us, the matriarch said plainly. The word echoed. The daughters exchanged looks, then smirked. Oh, the first said slowly. That sounds like an excuse. A very strange one, the third added. Are you certain, the second asked, that this is about his safety, and not your curiosity? The human's pulse spiked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. This felt like a family matter that could end with him accidentally offending someone powerful enough to fold stars. The matriarch straightened. You will not touch him, she said. You will not test him. You will not compete over him. The daughter's eyes gleamed. Compete? The first repeated. Touch? The second echoed. The third smiled faintly. Mother, you should have been clearer. The human felt it then, a shift in the room, subtle but unmistakable. Whatever protection he had just been given had also painted a target on him. And somewhere deep in the matriarch's calm expression, something like concern flickered. She had claimed him first. And her daughters were already planning how to challenge that. By the next cycle, the entire household had accepted one thing as fact: the human was the problem. Not because he had done anything wrong, on the contrary, his greatest crime was existing quietly, breathing too fast when startled, and apologizing even when no one accused him of anything. But his presence had unsettled a balance that had existed long before his species had discovered fire. The daughters gathered without their mother, standing in a semicircle while the human sat on a low resting platform, feet dangling because it had not been designed for someone his size. He clasped his hands together, knuckles pale, trying to look respectful and non-threatening. It was not working. Somehow, that only made things worse. So, the first daughter said, tilting her head slightly, you are a human male. Yes, he replied. I think so. Last time I checked. The second daughter circled him slowly, eyes scanning him with open curiosity, not unlike a scientist inspecting a rare but disappointingly small specimen. You are softer than expected. I get that a lot, he muttered, then immediately winced. I mean, sorry. That wasn't. The third daughter leaned in closer than necessary. Mother says she claimed you for your safety. That's what she said. The human agreed quickly, nodding too much. I'm very grateful. Safety is good. The daughters exchanged glances. Do you know, the first daughter asked, what it means when someone claims another in our culture? The human hesitated. I was hoping you'd tell me. That hesitation sealed their interpretation. They stepped back, straightening, expressions shifting from curiosity to resolve. She didn't tell him, the second daughter said. Of course she didn't, the third replied. She never does when she wants control. The human blinked. Control? Nothing, the first daughter said brightly, then smiled at him in a way that made his stomach drop. Come. If Mother believes she can decide your fate alone, she is mistaken. Before he could protest, they ushered him to his feet. He stumbled, barely keeping up as they led him through corridors that grew increasingly ornate. His internal alarm bells rang louder with every step. "This feels," he said carefully, "like the beginning of something I didn't consent to." "Nonsense," the second daughter replied. "This is cultural exploration." "And fairness," the third added. They brought him to an open chamber bathed in warm light. Cushioned platforms surrounded a central space filled with softly humming energy fields. The human stared. "What is this?" he asked. "A bonding arena," the first daughter said proudly. His soul briefly attempted to exit his body. "I would like to formally state," he said, voice cracking just slightly, "that humans bond over meals and shared television programs." "How charming," the second daughter said, activating a nearby console. "We will begin gently." Gently, it turned out, was relative. The first daughter demonstrated physical prowess, leaping, lifting, displaying strength with an enthusiasm that shook the floor. The human applauded weakly, then sat down because his legs felt wobbly. The second daughter followed with intellectual dominance, projecting complex star maps and strategic theories, asking him questions faster than he could process. He answered what he could, guessed the rest, and apologized for guessing. The third daughter tried emotional connection, sitting too close and asking deeply personal questions about his childhood, fears, and romantic history. That one nearly broke him. "I had a goldfish," he said at one point, eyes glassy. "It died." The third daughter nodded solemnly, misinterpreting his distress entirely. "Strong emotional depth," she murmured. By the time they finished, the human's breathing was shallow, his face flushed, sweat beading at his temples. He smiled weakly, desperate to appear cooperative. "You're all very impressive," he said. "Could I maybe rest?" The daughters stared. Rest? They had not considered rest. "Is he ill?" the second daughter asked. "Perhaps overwhelmed by attraction," the first suggested. The human slid down onto the platform, hands trembling. "No attraction. Just fatigue. Humans fatigue. A lot." The third daughter frowned. "He is shaking." "That is normal," he said quickly. "Sometimes. When stressed. Or excited. Or scared." "Scared?" the first daughter echoed, eyes widening. "Not of you," he rushed to clarify. "Just of disappointing you." That, apparently, was the wrong thing to say. They leaned in closer, curiosity reignited. The human's vision blurred slightly at the edges. He felt like prey trapped by politeness. The doors slid open. The matriarch entered. She took one look at the human, slumped, pale, breathing too fast, and her calm shattered. "What?" she said softly, dangerously. "Have you done?" The daughter straightened. "We were only spending time with him," the first said. "Equal time," the second added. "He seemed receptive," the third said, gesturing to his trembling hands. The matriarch crossed the room in 3 strides and placed herself between them and the human. She knelt, lowering herself to his level. "Breathe," she instructed gently. He obeyed immediately, clinging to her voice like a lifeline. Her gaze snapped back to her daughters, blazing. "This," she said, "is exactly why I claimed him." The daughters hesitated for the first time. "He is not a trophy," the matriarch continued. "He is not a challenge. And he is certainly not equipped for your enthusiasm." "But mother," the first began. "No," she interrupted. "You mistook my silence for indulgence." The human, still catching his breath, raised a weak hand. "For what it's worth," he said, "you're all very intense." Silence followed. The matriarch exhaled slowly. "You see?" she said. "You nearly broke him." The daughters looked at the human again, really looked this time, and something shifted. Confusion crept in, followed by unease. They had assumed resistance would be loud. They had not expected it to be fragile. And as the human leaned unconsciously closer to the matriarch, seeking safety without even realizing it, the truth began to form, something about humans that none of them had fully understood yet. Something their mother already knew. The matriarch did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room had gone still in a way that only happened when she was deciding whether something was a mistake or a lesson. The daughters remained standing, suddenly uncertain, while the human sat on the edge of the platform, breathing more steadily now, though his hands still trembled faintly in his lap. "You believe," the matriarch said at last, "that I claimed him out of desire?" The first daughter hesitated. "It was a reasonable assumption." "No," the matriarch replied. "It was a careless one." She turned, gesturing for the human to remain seated. He nodded quickly, relieved not to be moved again. The matriarch straightened and faced her daughters fully. "Long before any of you held rank," she began, "I studied emerging species. Not for conquest. Not for control. For understanding." The second daughter frowned. "Humans are barely interstellar." "They are," the matriarch agreed. "Which is why they are dangerous to misunderstand." With a small motion of her hand, the air before them shimmered. A holographic display bloomed into existence, rows of symbols, diagrams, and unfamiliar images. The human squinted. "Are those charts?" he asked. "Yes," the matriarch said. "Human behavioral studies." The third daughter stiffened. "You researched them?" "Extensively." The display shifted, showing simplified diagrams of a human form next to alien silhouettes, size comparisons, muscle density, skeletal stress points. Several warnings pulsed faintly. "Human males," the matriarch continued, "are not built for prolonged dominance displays, aggressive courtship rituals, or competitive attention." The first daughter scoffed. "He is an adult. He is a mammal," the matriarch corrected. "With a nervous system that prioritizes social harmony over physical resilience." The human raised a hand slowly. "I'd just like to say, thank you for saying that." The matriarch inclined her head slightly, then continued. "You assumed enthusiasm would flatter him. That attention would strengthen him." Her gaze sharpened. "You were wrong." The display changed again, this time showing human stress indicators. Elevated heart rate. Shallow breathing. Cortisol spikes. "When overwhelmed," the matriarch said, "humans do not challenge. They endure." Quietly. The daughters fell silent. "I observed this during my time among them," she went on. "They smile when afraid. They apologize when harmed. They seek safety without admitting they need it." The human stared at the floor, face heating. "We don't like to make a fuss." "I know," the matriarch said gently. The hologram shifted again, now showing what appeared to be two humans sitting across from each other, separated by a small table. "This," the matriarch said, "is a human courtship interaction." The daughters leaned forward. "There is food," the second daughter noted. "Yes." "They are seated," the first added. "Yes." "They are not challenging each other," the third said slowly. "No." The matriarch folded her arms. "Human attraction is built on safety. On permission. On restraint." The daughters exchanged looks. "And when those elements are absent?" the second daughter asked. The matriarch's voice hardened. "Then the human male shuts down. Or breaks." The human shifted uncomfortably. "Break is a strong word." "It is an accurate one," she replied. The display now showed a series of red markers flashing, cases, statistics, warnings. The daughter's confidence began to crack. "You thought," the matriarch said, "that my claim was indulgence. That I desired what you now desire." She stepped closer to them. "I claimed him because without clear protection, he would be pressured, tested, admired into harm." Silence stretched. The first daughter spoke quietly. "You could have told us." "And you would have listened?" the matriarch asked. The daughter hesitated. The matriarch exhaled. "I suspected you would need to see it." She turned her gaze back to the human. He sat small on the platform, shoulders rounded, eyes attentive but wary. Not weak, never weak, but limited in ways they had not respected. You endured their attention, the matriarch said. You did not protest. The human shrugged. They seemed excited. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. The third daughter's throat clicked softly. You were frightened. Yes, he admitted after a moment. But you weren't trying to hurt me. So I thought I should cope. The word hung in the air. Cope. The matriarch turned back to her daughters. This is why I claimed him. Not to possess. To protect. The first daughter's voice faltered. We thought you were hiding something improper. The matriarch allowed herself a thin smile. I was hiding knowledge. She dismissed the hologram with a gesture. The room felt quieter without it, heavier. You see scandal where there is caution, she said. You saw desire where there was foresight. The daughter stood in silence, chastened. The human cleared his throat. For what it's worth, he said softly, your culture is impressive. Just maybe a little intense for us. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, the second daughter laughed, a short, embarrassed sound. We nearly overwhelmed him to collapse, she said. The third nodded slowly, and mistook his distress for interest. The first looked away. We assumed resistance would be loud. The matriarch's gaze softened, just slightly. Humans resist by surviving. The human looked up at that, something like pride flickering across his tired expression. The daughters bowed their heads, not in submission, but in understanding. What they had wanted had not been wrong. What they had done, however, had been. And for the first time since the human had arrived on their world, the room was filled not with tension or curiosity, but respect. The silence that followed felt different from the others. It was no longer heavy with accusation or curiosity. It was careful. Measured. As if everyone in the room had realized that something delicate had been placed between them, and no one wanted to be the one who cracked it. The human shifted on the platform, clearing his throat. His heart still beat faster than he liked, but his breathing had steadied, and with it came a quiet resolve he hadn't known he had. He had spent his entire time among them trying to fit himself into their expectations. Now, for once, he needed them to hear him instead. I think, he said slowly, choosing each word with care, this is the part where I'm supposed to say something important. All eyes turned to him. He swallowed. Where I'm from, being fought over doesn't feel flattering. It feels dangerous. The daughters listened, their postures no longer predatory or proud, but attentive. The matriarch remained still, giving him the space she had always intended him to have. I know I'm small, he continued, gesturing vaguely at himself. And slow. And I get tired easily. But I'm not a prize. I'm just me. The third daughter tilted her head. You do not enjoy being desired? I enjoy being asked, he replied gently. That landed harder than any accusation. When everyone wanted time with me, he went on, I didn't know how to say no without offending someone. On Earth, saying no can already be hard. Here, it felt impossible. The second daughter's gaze dropped. You believed refusal would anger us. Yes, he admitted. And I didn't think my safety mattered enough to risk that. The matriarch's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I survived my crash by being careful, the human said. By listening. By adapting. Humans don't survive by overpowering things. We survive by avoiding harm until we can go home. The first daughter spoke quietly. And we made you feel as though there was no safe place to stand. He nodded. I don't think any of you meant to hurt me, he added quickly. But intention doesn't change impact. Silence followed, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that meant understanding was taking root. The matriarch stepped forward at last. You were correct to speak, she said. And you were correct to expect better. She turned to her daughters. Our customs, she continued, were built for our kind. Not his. We allowed excitement to override responsibility. The daughters bowed their heads, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. We are sorry, the second daughter said, her voice sincere. We saw attention as a gift. We did not see the weight of it. The third added, we mistook endurance for consent. The first met the human's eyes. You deserved clarity. And choice. The human felt something loosen in his chest. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself together until that moment. Thank you, he said simply. The matriarch raised her hand, and a soft chime echoed through the chamber. Effective immediately, she announced. The human is no longer classified under claim protocols. The human's stomach flipped. I'm not in trouble, am I? A hint of amusement flickered in her eyes. On the contrary. He will instead be designated as a protected guest, she continued. All interactions will require explicit consent, rest intervals, and cultural mediation. The daughters blinked. Rest intervals? The second repeated. Yes, the matriarch said firmly. Humans require them. The human smiled, relief washing over him. We really do. Additionally, she added, all research regarding human social behavior will be shared publicly to prevent further misunderstandings. The third daughter winced. The entire council will know we overwhelmed him. They will learn, the matriarch replied, that enthusiasm without restraint is not strength. The human stood carefully, testing his balance. He felt small among them still, but no longer trapped. I don't know how long I'll be here, he said. But while I am, I'd like to be treated like a person. Not a challenge. The daughters nodded, solemn. That can be arranged, the first said. Later, as the human was escorted to a quieter chamber, one with softer light, lower gravity, and seating actually designed for him, the matriarch paused beside him. You endured more than you should have, she said. I regret that. You protected me, he replied. Even when I didn't know I needed it. She inclined her head. As he settled into the calm of the room, he became dimly aware of alerts spreading through the greater network, updates, guidelines, revisions. Somewhere far beyond the residence, alien officials would be reading new advisories about human interaction limits, emotional thresholds, and the dangers of excessive admiration. The human closed his eyes, finally able to rest. Across the stars, humanity would never know that one of its own had quietly reclassified an entire species' approach to strength. Not by force, but by knowing when to ask for safety, and when to speak.